Hi, welcome. My name is Summer, and I am a real deal alcoholic and addict. Um, Welcome to Big Book Compendium's Friday night Big Book study. We are here tonight with John C. And I touched on this a little bit before, but for all of you know that are listening, I can tell that John has an amazing service-oriented heart, and he really has a desire to help others. And I've never met him, nor have I talked to him. But you just know when someone shows up when things are stressful and you talk to them briefly, like you can get that feeling. So I just want to thank you, John, for coming at a little bit last minute. And if you would like to introduce yourself and tell us your home group or whatever information you want to tell us.
Sure. Thanks so much, Summer. That was a beautiful introduction. My name is John. I'm a grateful alcoholic, and I used to be a hateful alcoholic. And my home group is Fellowship of the Spirit, and we meet every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern online. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's dive right into it. Again, we're on page 7 in the big book. That's Bill's story. And yeah, we're at the first real paragraph where it says, my brother-in-law is a physician. And I'll start to read, and then we'll stop when it's when we feel like there's something needs to be explained or whatever. So put your seatbelts on. This is going to be good. All right. My brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much, but best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally. You want to comment on that, John? If you have anything?
Sure. Yeah, it just reminds me that the problem centers in the mind, and realizing that not only do I have an allergy when I put substances in my system, but the fact that my mind tells me it's going to be different every time. And even though I've taught myself time and time again, it won't be. I continue to my addict, my alcoholic, my poison mind tricks me into thinking it's going to be different the next time.
Thank you. I did learn not too long ago about the belladonna treatment. I guess it's an actual poisonous plant that they give people. Okay, I'm really saying right. Okay, that they give people to calm them down, sedate them, it helps with alcohol withdrawals. So they were giving him that until his brain cleared. Like that's probably what he thought. But also, for me, hydrotherapy, mild exercise, not eating, having a new boyfriend, dating, whatever, those all, those are all things that helped much, maybe made me feel like, oh, I can join this Bible study or I can do this and that. And it helped me start to feel okay, but it's not the long-term solution that we're looking for. It's not the long-term recovery that I'm looking for. And here Bill says, best of all, I met a doctor, that's Dr. Silkworth, who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, he had actually been seriously ill, bodily and mentally. So we know about the body reacts to the alcohol or the substance that comes into the body, right? It's called an allergy because it's an adverse reaction. It's not like we have hives all over us like strawberries. It's an adverse reaction. And then we're pretty much powerless from then on out. And the obsession of our mind and the mental part of this disease is very, very crazy. Like as I'm in AA even longer, and as I'm in this program, like I learn some crazy stories about where the mental twist or the mental blank spot, like all of a sudden you're just sitting somewhere and they're drinking or whatever. It's like I've heard some very unique stories, and that's why I know what John said is that the disease lives and is from our minds. So the mind is actually probably the most important aspect at this point when we're reading this, but I think they all level out a little bit. You want to I'll keep reading. All right. It revealed me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months later, the goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. Yeah. Sometimes I think we have to learn the hard way, because it's kind of tricky. Like, this is a spiritual program and it's led by the spirit and we have higher powers. But, like we get on, or I'll just say for myself, I get on and I want to study the big book. I want to get that knowledge. And, I heard a speaker say, knowledge is not power. It was Bob Darrell, actually. He's like, it's not power. Like, not knowing is power. Putting everything aside, setting it aside, and walking into the unknown, that's courageous. That's powerful. You have anything, John?
Just with that, how in that paragraph, it talks about we can be good in other respects, but when it comes to alcohol, all bets are off, and I could maintain a job, I could show up and be a dad. But whenever I drank, all bets were off and I couldn't guarantee what would happen. So I often tricked myself into thinking alcohol wasn't a problem because I was functional. I was a functional one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. That's great. That's great input. All right. But we're at the bottom of page 7, the second to last real paragraph. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. Yeah. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last, finally. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. John?
Yeah, just the insanity of it, thinking that, again, having that drink, thinking that it's going to be different this time, and everything coming crashing down into the darkness yet again. And that loneliness and that despair that we feel, and that shame and that remorse, and that it seems like everything is crumbling around us. And then we finally get to that place, that gift of desperation, and some of us then get that gift of willingness. And it seems like this is where he first started to recognize that he needed that to get well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That was great. Thank you so much. And now I've lost my place. Okay. Back on page 8, the first real paragraph. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. All right, so go ahead, John. I want to hear what you have to say.
I really think that again, it just speaks to that insanity, that it's going to be different,
Mhm.
and recognizing that, the substance is the problem. Once we put the substance into our body, there's no guarantee where we're going to go, and every time we do, we end up in this pit, and we continue to go back there and further down each time.
Yep. I was gonna also touch on if anyone knows anything about quicksand. I just love the analogy that Bill writes here, because he said this quicksand stretched all around him in all directions. Well, the funny thing about quicksand is it looks like it's safe. Like it looks like it's like a sand little, just a nice little, oh, I can put my toes in it. Well, once you dare to stick your toes in there, the harder you like try to get them out, you go down, the force brings you down. And you can try to like scramble out, but the more you try, the stronger the stronger that the quicksand is. And so he uses that, and he's just such a brilliant writer. And no words can tell of the loneliness and despair found in that bitter morass of self-pity. So he's feeling loneliness, despair, self-pity. He's basically also being humble. This, like, the last 3 paragraphs is that I believe Bill is, his pride is starting to level out a little bit. It's getting like stomped on. The ego's getting like stomped on. But our higher power loves us so much that he, won't allow us to repeat the same sorts of situations. And I think Bill was at his end. He never took a drink again. And so, the things that God does for us when we're hopeless and desperate, the stories still knock me off my feet when I hear them. So that's the beautiful thing about AA or whatever fellowship, is that we can all come together and listen about, we can identify. And that's all I had to say. And also he was overwhelmed. There's all of this stuff. If you think about it, it kind of reminds me of the bedevilments, like irritable, well, also restless, irritable, and discontent, can't find a job, trouble with personal relationships, full of fear. Do you know what the other ones are? Can't think of it right now. It's on 52, right?
Yeah, we having trouble with the personal relationships, couldn't control our emotional natures, a prey to misery and depression, couldn't make a living, and that feeling of uselessness, full of fear, we were unhappy and couldn't seem to be of real help to other people.
Right. Awesome. So, all right. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. So now he just used self-knowledge as his, a way of getting over the disease. And now I'm just prepping you for the next sentence. Now he's going to allow fear to sober him out. Fear is going to be the reason that he doesn't drink again, because he doesn't want to go there again. So fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the 4th dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. There's a lot in this paragraph. What do you say, John? What do you have?
Put me on the spot. I love it. I think this is where Bill starts to feel like he's developing an idea for how to get out of the pit that he's been in. So, and again, though, thinking this is the last time, this isn't going to be like this again. And the insanity, a friend of mine always says, stay away from that first sucker drink. If we can stay away from that first sucker drink, everything will be all right. And then it kind of alludes, it's almost like a prelude to the, to the promises, where it's that I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. That's how I feel today, and now that I've gone through these steps and found the solution in this book.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A really beautiful line in this paragraph is how dark it is before the dawn. And in reality, I don't know if he knew it then, but when he looked back in retrospect, the reality of the situation was that was the beginning of his end, and it's dark. We have to walk through darkness to get to the light. So I relate a lot to Bill, and he goes from this like prideful, like I'm all around the businesses and the stock market doing all this stuff, to trembling. He stepped from the hospital a broken man, and he was overwhelmed. He had self-pity, bitterness, despair, loneliness. So the disease or illness of alcoholism or drug addiction can be really quick for some people, or it can be more drawn out for others. So, I think that Bill probably drank for 20 years. I think I may be totally wrong, but I mean, it takes us longer to qualify and realize if, first of all, do we want help? Do we want to do this? Do we want this way of life? And then also to make sure that we're real alcoholics or real drug addicts, because there's classifications, as we talked about in the doctor's opinion. I think there's the hard drinker, there's the real alcoholic, and then there's like I don't know what the other one is, like medium drink or something. It's yeah. So that's all I really wanted to say. I hope that made sense. But when we to me, this sounds like a place of surrender when he says alcohol was my master. So he was worshiping alcohol. He knew it was wrong. And don't we all do that though? Even when the substances are gone, like I worship other things, and like, that's my God. And someone once told me that what you think about the most is your God. It's who you're worshiping. And I think about self a lot, me and my little designs and what I think should go where and how it should go. And it doesn't necessarily work. Actually, it really never works. It backfires. So, because selfishness, self-centeredness, that is the root of our problem. Okay, so we're moving on to the bottom of 8. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. Squiggly lines. He was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of the recapturing the spirit of the other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a JAG. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing, an oasis, drinkers are like that. Okay, I think I probably read too much, but what do you have to say, John?
No, I think your spirit led you to read it all.
Okay.
This reminds me of that Misery Loves Company, and when I was out there drinking and using, and all I could think about, consumed me 24 hours a day, that next drink. What was I going to do on a holiday if the store was closed? Like how was I going to get what I need if I was out of money from my dealer? Like all those things that crossed my mind, every moment of the day. That was the main thing that consumed me. And then also, seeing his friend and although he's surprised he looks well, the first thing he can think about is how to bring him down, how they can go down together to the way they lived before. So that misery loves company, and I think here is where it's talking about Abby coming to see him, and how Abby had found faith in the Oxford group. And I guess this really is Bill, in my eyes, this is Bill's saving grace. Long before that phone call, this is, a little bit of maybe something at the time that he didn't realize that gave him that motivation to make that call.
Thank you. Beautiful. All right. I'm going to continue reading. Middle of page 9. The door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into this fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now, I suspected, a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. Bless his heart. Let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. Let's stop there. So, it talks about in a lot of places, but also in the big book a couple times, about there's something being different about our eyes. Eyes are the windows to our soul. That's like a phrase. But here in the big book, he even says there was something about his eyes. It was inexplicably different. What had happened? It goes from like dark eyes to like light. And that's one of the first like signs that I've seen people come out of detox and, separated from the substance. And I've seen their eyes, they're totally different than when they went in or when I dropped them off. And he also says this, Bill says, he looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion. So as alcoholics, we know it, it's really hard to look people in the face, with when we're not telling the truth. There's even a promise around it that we'll be able to look people in the eyes. We'll be able to go through the day. And here he's demonstrating one of the promises in our big book, because he looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion. He has sober eyes. And Bill still makes his little jokes and acts like, however, and then he did have the uncouth, or I don't know what the word would be called, but he actually did it. He actually offered a beer to Ebby. Like, he had the guts to do that because he was longing for the good old days. He just wanted to have him and his friend had this great conversation. And it makes me think sometimes it's not always the substance or the alcohol that we miss, or that causes us to go back again. Sometimes, like with Bill saying here, he wanted that to recreate that moment that he had with Ebby. He wanted it to be like that. And I don't know. I don't know what I was going on, but I was just trying to explain that, with him and Ebby, he still had the nerve to drink. And then he says, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. So he's obviously calculating in his head, if I have 5 shots here, 10 shots here, that gin will last me till tomorrow. It kind of reminds me of what you were saying about John, about our mental problem here is that we continue just like we did before, even when we are separated from the drink, our mind lies to us and tells us there's an easier, softer way. We're not like those people. We're different. And among many other things, that if maybe one day, maybe just one day, I can have a drink, or maybe do acid. I mean, like, that's not the way that we should be thinking, but that's the way that our mental capacity is. That's what happens to us. It takes a lot of time for your mind to reprogram, and reprogram that's the word I was looking for. Okay. I'm continuing on page 9 at the bottom. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays. Way over there on the hillside, there was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of such church folk and their doings, his insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died, these recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. All right, John, take it away. Tell us something.
Yeah, sure. When I read this, I think about Bill's resistance to religion and God, and his connection with Father Ed, and how that helped him grow that spirituality. And he became a spiritual advisor, and I think that led to a lot of beautiful things in Alcoholics Anonymous, and made sure that our wording stayed open so that people could have their own conception. It speaks to the resistance of a lot of us, I think, especially early on, when we're first coming in the doors. Definitely the last thing I believed in was God of any kind when I got here. And what you said earlier too, just a paragraph ago, about that, we missed that connection, and I think when I would start my drinking and using career, I was the life of the party. And it was so much fun. And then it became, I was alone trying to stop the light from coming in the curtains, and I was isolated. But then again, that problem in the mind that tells me if I've been sober and I'm bored and I'm not connected and I'm not in this program and I'm not in this book, how I can find that isolation again. And then my mind is telling me, what a drink would do right now, what a drug would do, what a party would do right now. Like, that's what you need to do. So it's, again, that trickery of the disease, and that resistance to religion. That's really what speaks to me here.
Yes, thank you. I like at the bottom of page 9, Bill's describing, like, he had a judgment against Ebby. He came in and he's going to tell me all this stuff and all this stuff I have to do. And he even said, well, at least I'll have my gin, basically my best friend, so I can tolerate this conversation. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court, persuaded the judge, and got him out of, Ebby got, he had to do I think it was community service or something, but he didn't have to pay his full time. Do his full time or whatever, but these people showed up for him. And that was 2 months ago, and he's not in jail. The results are self-evident. Whatever happened worked. So, and then immediately we go and pass the experience on to someone else, the most important part of this program. Bill Wilson was in bed, still shivering, withdrawing from alcohol, and a thought comes in his mind that says, I wonder how we could get this to all the other alcoholics, or I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but he's sitting there thinking about how he can be of service to people, and he's withdrawing from alcohol. For me, I'm like, give me at least a year, and then we'll No, but you know what I mean? Like he's in the hospital bed. And Ebby seems, I mean, Ebby didn't take a lot of time off. It was 2 months ago that he was facing some charges. I don't remember exactly what they were, but now he's going to visit people, his friends that he knows were sloppy or alcoholics or whatever, and he's sharing that with them. I mean, yeah, he had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. That's another thing, like we can't change people. We can lead them to the water, but we cannot make them drink it, right? And I like how AA does, we don't have to push it on anyone because we know it works, or the 12 steps, I'm sorry. We know that these steps, in conjunction with some spiritual disciplines that are laid out in this book, and hopefully a good connection with a sponsor, all of this is, a beautiful thing. But like, I was shocked when I heard about Bill Wilson only being in bed for 5 days when he wanted to go carry the message. But I was trying to explain about, what it's like to be of service, and how, like, when you get into step 12, like I finally felt like I had a purpose. I finally felt like maybe all this stuff that I went through, all the darkness and all the struggles, maybe that can be helpful to someone else who or is struggling with this and can't find, a relief. So I really appreciate, being able to work with other people. And it sounds to me that Ebby was maybe done with his 12 or his 6 steps of the Oxford group by this time. Is that true, John? Do you know if he was done? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was.
Mhm.
And then again, you reminded me what you were just saying too, like that attraction, not promotion.
Mhm.
Right? Like Abby is just being this example and not really preaching to him, but just telling him about how things have changed.
Mhm.
Seeing some hope in that.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Let's keep reading. We're on page 10. The first real paragraph. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that Crawford temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that the fears really had. Did I already read this paragraph? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, guys. We're going to go down 1. I already read that. I was like, okay. It's the middle of page 10. That wartime day in Old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggest vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation. But that was as far as I have gone. Okay, we'll stop there for a second. I like that Bill puts in here, so because not everyone is comfortable with the word God or the conception of God. I will say, like, sometimes I know it's easier just to say God, but it might be something else. It's just kind of easier to say that. But I like how he says, and he has many capital words that mean God, and we agnostic, but here's one, it's the spirit of the universe. For those that, are not sure about God, I mean, there's a spirit of the universe. It feels to me, I feel like this non-threatening at all. Like there is something out there we just don't know, because I came in very, very legalistically, lots of judgments of other people, but none of myself, right? And just legalistically, like, grown up in the church, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if someone told me, like you said, John, that I was gonna be like chilling with God like every day, I would have been like out, like I already had my stuff with God. Like, but it's the spirit of the universe. And there's so many other reference or names for the higher power. When we get to We Agnostic, I have my sponsees underline how many there are. I don't remember exactly the amount, but it's good to become accustomed to those that are non-threatening, those titles, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. All right, John, what do you have to say? If you have anything.
The only thing I can think of here is this is where Bill's got a spirit of willingness to believe that there's something to this universe that we're in, and there's some type of purpose, and he's willing to explore that. That's what stands out to me there.
So side note question, willingness, do you how do you describe willingness? Is it saying or trying things differently, saying that I'm going to do it better, or is it an action word?
That's good. When I was early in, I remember an old timer said to me, like, what's the alternative here? Are you willing to give this a try and see if anything changes for you? And if not, like, you can just go back to that life. Like, if what you're doing is working, what are you here for? But if what you're doing is working and you don't need us, that's cool too. This is optional. No one's telling you have to do this. But basically, people were telling me if I was willing to believe that this might work for me, then things could change.
Mm-hmm.
So at first it was really just the idea of believing that this might work. And then it became what I like to call, I guess, active willingness, where I was willing to take suggestions and follow the directions in the book towards the solution that's laid out.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your input. I'm going to keep reading at the bottom of page 10. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated, and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. So real quick with picking and choosing about, he says, for myself, I had adopted those parts which seem convenient. So we choose the things that are convenient, and then the rest of the suggestions or whatever, we won't even look at, and we disregard them. And I know, he's talking about this in the religious sense, but that's true for our program as well. Like, it's, we can't just take what we want and then it's either all or nothing. The middle of the road solution is not going to get us anywhere. Half measures avail us nothing. It doesn't even avail us what we should get. Like, we should get some credit for going halfway, right? We don't even get that. It's zero or nothing. I mean, zero or everything. Either God is or he isn't, and I don't know. It's very similar to what he's describing here with his relationship with a God that he didn't want to be around and stuff. Well, that's kind of true too for the program. Like, and we have someone telling us, like, making suggestions, like, I suggest you do this. And I'm like, my sponsor did but all out of love. I've never, ever seen like someone not do it out of love. And that's what God is. God is love. It says, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction. I want some of that. So I want to be connected to that, because I want to be able to have that, unconditional love with no judgments, that superhuman strength, to be able to have faith when nothing else seems like it's adding up. Or the other one was, and direction. So that's the same thing. I want to be connected to the person that's going to tell me the best way to go. I don't want to be on some non-Uber or non-DoorDash thing, like, or, I don't want to be just driven around somewhere. I want to know, how can I get there? What can we do? So I'm going to keep reading. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, this religious of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of a man, a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. That's cool. I want that too. Why don't you comment on this, John, if you have anything?
Sure. Thanks, Summer.
Mm-hmm.
Again, what strikes me with this is that the less I try to make sense of this program and why it works, the more I understand about it. The spiritual solution to me can't really be described. It has to be demonstrated. So you can give me instructions and I can follow them, but if I didn't see changes in people around me when I came into meetings, I would never have, at least for me, myself, I would have never felt inspired to stick around because I wanted what they had. And I think Bill knows at this point, like everything he has tried has failed. And now he's seeing someone who is on the same level as him, the same type of lifestyle that is, found a way to get well. And he's intrigued by that. And even though he wrestles with this like hypocrisy that he finds in religion, he's willing to believe that in a spiritual sense, his friend has found something that works when everything else had failed. So again, I think it gave him a little bit of the hope that he needed to keep, searching for a way out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So when our human will has failed, like we just read this couple, I guess last week, where it talks about that our willpower, it's on page 7, is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. So, our will is like not very strong when it comes to substances or whatever is perplexing us at that time. But also, at this point, he says his human will had failed. That means like even where he was doing well, like we would do well in different areas. And then with alcohol, like, who is this? Like there's no willpower, but we could like, I don't know, like work out and keep a diet plan or like be super, rigorous about things. And we willed that into our lives. But here, his human will had failed. So I imagine that everything, all of it, because it talks about his will for the substance and then his will for like other parts of their life, which wasn't much because a lot of alcoholics spend a lot of hours drinking or using, especially towards the end there. And another wonderful point is that doctors had pronounced him incurable. When I hear that, I get like emotional because it's like the medical association and doctors, and I went through some of this. Like they just were like, I don't know really what's wrong with you. And that was like 30 years ago, but they pronounced him like done, like incurable, like you may as well just lock yourself up because you can't do anything when you're out, but if you're in or whatever, I'm making a guess on that, but he admitted his complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead. This is a spiritual analogy of being risen from the dead. The old life is gone, the new comes, right? Like we're new creations. So the old is gone, the new comes, and that's what he's talking about when he says that people were, or not people, that he was coming, had a rising again experience, raised up from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. I'm going to keep reading. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. And this was none at all. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past, here sat a miracle directly across the table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. All right, what do you want to share about this, John?
Yeah, again, it just speaks to the power of attraction to this program, and how you can see that change in people when they're doing those things that are suggested to get well. And you can see here that state of mind of Bill's is starting to shift just a little bit. He's becoming willing to believe that there is a solution for him, even though doctors have written off people with addictions and alcoholism as hopeless. He's found that if he is willing to believe that there might be hope, that his friend's onto something here, that he might have a way out of his misery. And we think back, like just hours before this, he was feeling like, what's the point of life? All he cared about was just having enough gin to make it through the night. And now he's thinking, wow, there might be a way for me out of this, pit of depression and misery that I'm in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And it says, or Bill says, I saw that my friend was much more. So more than being inwardly reorganized, he was actually on a different footing. His roots grasped brand new soil. So like, we don't want our life back. We want to create a new life. And, he's on new soil, walking down, a different path, I guess. But it's not just about having your inwardly reorganized, which is a big part of it. But we start to have interest in other people. We start to, the promises come true as we do the steps, and we see those, and like a fear drops from us, all sorts of things, which may be classified as the inwardly reorganized part. But there's there's a spiritual experience and a psychic change that we need to have in order to get well. Not everyone does, because there's other people out there that might not drink the same as us, but it may look like they do. They might not need a spiritual experience. They might not, but I do. And I know a couple people on here. I know them well. You guys do too. I'm just kidding. But we need that spiritual, the psychic change is what I'm trying to say. And I just love how Bill writes. And another thing, what you had said, John, about like right here, he's starting to like kind of wake up. I thought the same thing. Like when he began it began to look as though religious people were right after all. Him saying that is like, I think of like a moment of clarity, like, oh, maybe there are some people that are right, and I'm not the only right one. Maybe all the thousands or millions of people that believe there's a higher power, maybe they're right, and I might not be right. So I thought of it being like a moment of clarity. And yeah. All right, it's 8:59. Okay, well, that went really fast. We're just going to stop at the top of page 12. do you have any closing comments, John?
I think to me, Bill's story always just reminds me of the insanity and the grandiosity of our own thinking.
Mm.
And that when we get well, just the importance of, being thoughtful enough to try to give it away to others. It's just the importance of working with others always really resonates for me whenever I read this chapter, and how important and how impactful and influential it was for Abby to show up and show him like, hey, I found a way out. So, continuing, each of us continuing to be an example of how this program works is really important. And just grateful to be here with all you beautiful people.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that you made it and you're here and you were able to, yeah, that was fun. That was fun. I'm going to stop the recording and then we're going to open up the room for questions and answers.